I'm here to enlist you in helping reshape the story about how humans and other critters get things done. Here's the old story. We've already heard a little bit about it. Biology is war, in which only the fiercest survive. Businesses and nations succeed only by defeating, destroying, and dominating competition. Now, commerce is ancient. Markets are as old as the crossroads. But capitalism, as we know it, is only a few hundred years old, enabled by cooperative arrangements and technologies such as the joint stock ownership company, shared liability insurance, double-entry bookkeeping. Now, of course, the enabling technologies are based on the internet. And in the many-to-many era, every desktop is now a printing press, a broadcasting station, a community, or a marketplace. Evolution is speeding up. More recently, that power is untethering and leaping off the desktops. And very, very quickly, we're going to see a significant portion, if not the majority of the human race, walking around, holding, carrying, or wearing supercomputers linked at speeds greater than what we consider to be broadband today. Now, when I started looking into collective action, the considerable literature on it is based on what sociologists call social dilemmas. And there are a couple of mythic narratives of social dilemmas. I'm going to talk briefly about two of them, the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of the commons. The prisoner's dilemma is actually a story that's overlaid on a mathematical matrix that came out of the game theory that in the early years of thinking about nuclear war, two players who couldn't trust each other. Let me just say that every unsecured transaction is a good example of a prisoner's dilemma. Person with the goods, person with the money, because they can't trust each other, are not going to exchange. Neither one wants to be the first one, or they're going to get the sucker's payoff. But both lose, of course, because they don't get what they want. If they could only agree, if they could only turn a prisoner's dilemma into a different payoff matrix called an assurance game, they could proceed. 20 years ago, Robert Axelrod used the prisoner's dilemma as a probe of the biological question: if we're here because our ancestors were such fierce competitors, how does cooperation exist at all? He started a computer tournament for people to submit prisoner's dilemma strategies, and discovered, much to his surprise, that a very, very simple strategy won. It won the first tournament, and even after everyone knew it won the second tournament. That's known as tit for tat. Another economic game that may not be as well known as the prisoner's dilemma is the ultimatum game. And it's also a very interesting probe of our assumptions about the way people make economic transactions. Here's how the game's played. There are two players. They've never played the game before. They will not play it again. They don't know each other, and they are, in fact, in separate rooms. First player is offered $100 and is asked to propose a split. 50-50, 90-10, whatever that player wants to propose. The second player either accepts the split, both players are paid, and the game is over, or rejects the split, neither player is paid, and the game is over. Now, the fundamental basis of neoclassical economics would tell you it's irrational to reject a dollar because somebody you don't know in another room is going to get 99. Yet, in thousands of trials with American and European and Japanese students, a significant percentage would reject any offer that's not close to 50-50. And although they were screened and didn't know about the game and had never played the game before, proposers seem to innately know this because the average proposal was surprisingly close to 50-50. Now, the interesting part comes in more recently when anthropologists began taking this game to other cultures and discovered to their surprise that slash-and-burn agriculturalists in the Amazon, or nomadic pastoralists in Central Asia, or a dozen different cultures, each had radically different ideas of what is fair, which suggests that instead of there being an innate sense of fairness, that somehow the basis of our economic transactions can be influenced by our social institutions, whether we know that or not. Now, I've been talking about how new forms of communication and new media in the past have helped create new economic forms. Commerce is ancient. Markets are very old. Capitalism is fairly recent. Socialism emerged as a reaction to that. And yet we see very little talk about how the next form may be emerging. Jim Surowiecki briefly mentioned Yochai Benkler's paper about open source, pointing to a new form of production, peer-to-peer production. I simply want you to keep in mind that if in the past new forms of cooperation enabled by new technologies create new forms of wealth, we may be moving into yet another economic form that is significantly different from previous ones. Very briefly, let's look at some businesses. IBM, as you know, HP, Sun, some of the most fierce competitors in the IT world are open sourcing their software, are providing portfolios of patents for the commons. Eli Lilly, in, again, the fiercely competitive pharmaceutical world, has created a market for solutions for pharmaceutical problems. Toyota, instead of treating its suppliers as a marketplace, treats them as a network and trains them to produce better, even though they are also training them to produce better for their competitors. Now, none of these companies are doing this out of altruism. They're doing it because they're learning that a certain kind of sharing is in their self-interest. Instead of neither of us can trust each other, so we have to make suboptimal moves, it's you prove to me that you're trustworthy and I will cooperate.